Hi, my name is Phil Hotchmuth. I'm the program manager of the Security Products and Services Research Group at IDC. And today I'm going to talk about the shift to cloud security in the decentralized enterprise. And what this involves is the issues around deperimeterization, that is the loosening of enterprise controls over the perimeter, traditional firewalls, and the introduction of mobility and consumerization into the enterprise that's causing concern among enterprises. The slide illustrates kind of the shift that's been happening over the last several years. We've seen from just not too long ago when enterprises were pretty much closed and enterprises, end users pretty much accessed databases and applications internally on the LAN or over the corporate WAN if they were in a remote office. Connectivity for remote users was largely VPN-based, and overall control was pretty standard for access and accessibility. What we have now today is a little bit more of a disjointed model where different types of employees are accessing more types of sensitive systems than ever before. Contractors, part-time employees, even partners and customers are gaining access to valuable information, and a lot of it's being done over web applications. A lot of enterprises are web-enabling these applications and providing credentials and enabling that type of access. And on top of that, you have the evolution of mobility, which is extending these types of applications out to new types of devices. On the left here, we have a lot of the types of gadgets that employees are starting to bring into the office: iPhones, iPads, even personal storage on things like e-readers, USB sticks. Pretty commonplace now in a lot of workplaces. And then in the cloud, the untrusted environments of cloud-based storage, social media. Very easy now to upload photos, large files to these types of environments, particularly Google Docs, which is basically an entire office environment hosted in the cloud. Some enterprises see these as threats, basically, as they lose control over what the employees are doing with the sensitive data and the easy access they have to these types of pretty powerful technologies that are, for the most part, out of the control of traditional security. This slide shows our forecasts for shipments of PCs and smartphones. And as you can see, last year was kind of the tipping point where smartphones outshipped PCs for the first time, and pretty much there's no going back at this point. We forecast strong growth, very aggressive strong growth for smartphones over the next 5 years. PC growth relatively flat. And what this means is that enterprise end users, employees will be bringing these devices to work, and they will expect them to work in the office environment on the wireless LAN, or if they're mobile on the 3G, 4G network, they're going to expect access to the things that they use at work to get their job done: email, corporate applications, and things of the like. So some data from our 2011 survey, which we ran in the fall, shows pretty much the top 3 issues facing enterprise security professionals today. The number one issue being preventing exposure of confidential information. Over half of the organization said this was their top issue, followed by the increased sophistication of attacks, and then the issue of mobile clients and unmanaged devices. So those are the top 3. But in reality, you can kind of tie mobility and consumerization to all 3 of these top issues. Obviously, the prevention of exposure and confidential information, that ties directly to the consumerization issue that we talked about in terms of mobile devices, sensitive data moving to untrusted environments. So securing the mobile workforce, the approaches that are being used right now, for the large part, a lot of enterprises still see the mobile employee. They're trying to still use traditional perimeter-type defenses to some extent to protect them. They're, to some extent, trying to stretch the corporate firewall to encompass the mobile user. This is an issue, and it's being done by pretty much backhauling or VPNing the mobile traffic to the enterprise headquarters or branch office where a security appliance, either a firewall or a web gateway, can do the inspection. Challenges with this is that it introduces bandwidth costs by pulling all this traffic onto the corporate WAN as opposed to just letting it be on the 3G network. Latency can be introduced in this type of scenario because you're, in a sense, creating a bottleneck of mobile users on these platforms. And then there's also the limitations to scale. If you have a mobile workforce that's growing, and most enterprises probably do, relying on an appliance on-premise type of approach to secure those endpoints could be a challenge because they're going to end up eventually having to scale up the amount of infrastructure they have to protect it. So those are some of the challenges there. The SaaS approach to security obviously takes advantage of the ubiquity of the cloud service. Wherever the enterprise end user is, they're connected to the internet by a mobile network. That cloud service can then be attached to that and provide the security pretty much right where the person is, as opposed to having to backhaul traffic to a certain point. This obviously leads to better latency and scale, obviously, which is a big factor of why people are looking at cloud security. Some trends in cloud security adoption overall that we're tracking from our 2011 Cloud Security Survey, we found that over a third of enterprises are currently deploying cloud security in some fashion, whether it's messaging security, anti-spam, anti-malware for email, or possibly web security, security and vulnerability management, or also identity are some of the popular platforms that people are looking to the cloud for. But in general, in the next 12 to 24 months, over two-thirds of enterprises will probably have either deployed or planning to deploy cloud security. So pretty fast adoption rate there. For SMBs, we find that a lot of them tend to look to move more aggressively to the cloud in that they'll be more likely to either stop using on-premise appliances or just move to a cloud security service as a new type of service to them, as opposed to migrating from an on-premise solution. The benefits of security SaaS that we found in our survey, the biggest benefit that users of the technology found was the ability to scale up and down quickly and more flexibly, not being tied to an appliance's capacity or fixed set of capabilities. Also, the flexible subscription-based model for pricing, being able to have a little bit more flexibility in how you get the product delivered. And then some internal issues around shifting security staff away from managing specific on-premise security and then being able to look at more critical security issues. So a little bit less of the care and feeding of the on-premise technologies in the past. And then also support for remote and dispersed workforce. We've talked a lot about this. The ubiquity of a cloud security service to reach the mobile users or even remote and branch offices that once had appliances deployed, people see a big advantage in that area. A little bit more of a drill down of the SaaS versus appliances. In terms of cost, the SaaS and cloud security options, little to no acquisition cost of appliances. In most cases, there's no CPE involved in SaaS deployment. Whereas with appliances, obviously, you need to have the device on-premise to take advantage of that. Threat detection in the cloud, there are a lot of advanced security intelligence services that cloud providers can either utilize or provide themselves with reputation-type services. And having that in the cloud is an advantage as opposed to on-premise appliances, which might rely on periodical updates of signatures or other types of updates that give it the intelligence to look for the types of attacks that it needs to protect against. Ease of use and implementation, no hardware or software on-premise for SaaS deployments. Obviously, IT is required. People are required on-premise to deploy, care, and feed for the devices, which we talked about earlier. Latency can be an issue in terms of a cloud service if the provider you're looking at doesn't have a global footprint, if they're not available in all regions and you're looking to deploy broadly. That could be an issue depending on their capabilities. Control, to some extent, some enterprises cite the lack of control as a reason not to move to cloud security. A lot of enterprises prefer to have things in-house, the devices or the software themselves that they can touch and actually take care of. And security being a sensitive issue, some people are hesitant to move that to the cloud. Obviously, having the appliances on-premise helps alleviate that issue. And then there's also the green IT advantages of a SaaS solution. Again, no on-premise devices versus having to deploy hardware. So URL filtering, basically in terms of web security, you really just can't block sites anymore. That's an issue that a lot of enterprises are finding, particularly in terms of like Web 2.0 capabilities that are out there. Facebook, YouTube, even more complex applications like Salesforce.com. Enterprises need access to these websites or these types of solutions to some extent. And more fine-grained control over what people can do on the site as opposed to just blocking or limiting access to them is what a lot of enterprises are looking to do. We talked about data loss prevention as a key feature beyond URL filtering. That addresses particularly the issue of sensitive data loss. That was the top issue among enterprises that we surveyed. And then the complex exploits that are happening right now, malicious applications obviously are out there. Blended threats of email and URLs together are challenging, and more than just the basic web filtering is needed in the cloud. Some top SaaS security key functionality that people should look for in a solutions provider. Obviously, we talked about URL filtering, but more than just antivirus as well. Protection against botnets, malicious active content, and various browser exploits. That type of functionality should be included. We talked about data loss prevention being integrated. These are both inbound and outbound protections are important in that the end user activities looking at websites is one thing, but these websites, a lot of them are now more interactive. You can post to them. You can upload files to Facebook or even transfer files in a web-based IM client. So looking at these websites really more as applications than just HTTP traffic is the overall trend that we're talking about. And then, of course, a global footprint for low latency. If you're a large enterprise with widely deployed offices or a very mobile workforce, being able to provide services that are effective across a large scale is going to be important there. So web security SaaS advantages. We talked about some of these before, but again, no new software or devices to install. These can work seamlessly across mobile platforms. 24/7 security, no updates, inspections are done real time, and the mobile devices can obviously be accessed from any location. Simplifying security for the remote and branch locations. We talked about this a little bit, but again, it goes to sort of the dispersion of the new enterprise. No need to have either devices deployed in every single branch in the enterprise or even to backhaul traffic over the WAN to a central site for inspection and security. Uniform policy for users. If you have your policies and access control set in the cloud, there's no need to synchronize or worry about managing those across various locations or regions if you have an on-site appliance-based deployment, which can be an issue with that. And then centralized policy and reporting, having the ability to pull activities of all end users, what sites they're visiting, what types of networks they're accessing over, what types of content they're either pulling or pushing over the web. Being able to centralize access to that data as opposed to having to aggregate it from various points in the network, either over the WAN or remotely, is an advantage. Some conclusions to this section. Basically, we're advising enterprises to embrace consumerization. As you saw earlier in the slides, mobile devices, smartphones, these things aren't going away. They're coming into the enterprise. So figuring out a way to safely deploy, safely manage those is going to be important down the line. Move away from perimeter-based security to the cloud. So thinking about how to extend traditional on-premise security solutions to mobile users or remote offices, and think about a cloud service either as a way to supplement or place a traditional perimeter-type solution is a way to think about security in this new type of environment. And then mobile security starting in the cloud, especially for SMBs, thinking about cloud security as a way to pretty much provide a lot of different types of services beyond just filtering, like we talked about, things like DLP, advanced threat protection, and then, of course, obviously, fine-grained control of web activities, Web 2.0, things like that are going to be important to enterprises going forward.